Class is in session. Hi, everybody. Welcome to Unlearn 16. Guys, today I've decided to traverse to go into an area I never go into, to be perfectly honest. And I'm going to go there with humor and some serious questions and bring you along for the ride with Reverend Daniel, who I've had, I don't know, I feel myself lucky to have found you on Twitter and to have found the way in which you are able to craft your words on that platform to put people in their place, and predominantly, let's say, from your side of the religious fence. Welcome. Thank you so much for coming on. Maybe you can give the listeners a little bit about yourself so we know where we're starting from.
Yeah, thanks for having me. So my name's Daniel Brereton. I'm an Anglican priest in the Anglican Church of Canada. I've been ordained, it'll be 25 years this May. I'm a parish priest. I have a small congregation in Mississauga, just outside Toronto in Ontario. But a number of years ago, I got involved on Twitter, and that's kind of just grown into a big part of my ministry. And over COVID, when churches and like everything else sort of shut down, the whole online thing became really important. And one of the main ways that I engage not only my own parishioners but other people. And it's been a really interesting experience, sort of being religious online and not in a right-wing fundamentalist kind of way. Because they, as we'll talk about, I'm sure they dominate the religious area.
Absolutely they do. First of all, okay, I'm going to ask, as everybody, I would consider myself agnostic, maybe leaning towards atheism, although I really hope for Zeus. Is that I'm just putting that out there. But
he had good muscles.
What I've always been drawn to, and I have some friends like this, I have some coworkers like this, I've always been drawn to an authentic faith. And what I mean by that is I think you can see coming a mile away somebody who just feels something in their heart and has no push or desire or drive to make sure that what they believe and what they connect to is what everybody else needs to connect to.
Right.
And so I've always been drawn to that. And right away, reading your tweets, I'm like, oh no, this guy's amazing. Can I ask a question about Anglicanism before we start?
Sure.
Is it true?
I just want to make it clear, I am not authorized to speak on behalf of the whole Anglican communion, but I will do my best.
I'm going to get that out of the way. Wait, is it true that really the only difference between Catholicism and Anglicanism is the whole divorce? Is that about the crux of it? I just made you nervous.
The Anglican Church organizationally separated from Rome over King Henry VIII's divorce.
Got it.
Annulment, actually.
Henry VIII, I am. I got it.
Yeah. Yep. But no, there's a lot more differences. I mean, the thing is, the Roman Catholic Church, it's one church throughout the world, right? With one pope. So it's the Roman Catholic Church in Canada or the Roman Catholic Church in the United States. Whereas I am part of the Anglican Church of Canada. So the Anglican Church is worldwide, is made up of independent national churches, which have a historical link to the Church of England, but they're independent. So you have Anglican churches that ordain women as priests and bishops and others that don't. You have Anglican churches that authorize same-sex marriage and others that don't.
So
it's kind of like
there's a lot of balls in the air then.
Yeah, it's kind of like the Commonwealth, where we all have these kind of historic connections to England, but we're independent. Yeah.
Oh my god. Okay, so it depends on the church. Okay.
Yeah.
All right. So it's kind of like you guys really are the very sort of, I guess, link between complete Protestantism, which is like individual connection to God, and 50,000 different sects, and then Catholicism. I can never say the word sect, properly in order to
Yeah.
make sure people don't think I'm saying sex.
No, I was in this. I was in this show, this play called The Clergy Project, and we had this poster with myself, a Unitarian minister, and a woman Jewish rabbi, and the three of us are walking down the street, all of in our robes, and the meme was "sex in the city," which I love. So
That's amazing. That's amazing. Um, so it really sits in the middle, right? It sits in the
yeah,
middle of this very dominant hierarchy and papal infallibility of the Catholic Church,
yeah,
and then the sort of, I don't wish to say free for all, but it's kind of what I mean, of the Protestant, like, whole bunch of different divisions.
yeah.
I've studied some religion. I teach world religion, so I'm superficially, let's say,
Mhm.
aware of, some of those lines. Okay,
Yeah,
so you're not just about divorce. There's a lot of different things going on. Women can be ministers is a big thing.
yep,
Obviously, same-sex marriage is a big thing.
yep.
I'm going to tell you a quick story, and then I want us to get into Twitter and what you think about it. But when I was in like third year university, my dad passed, and I was very upset. But at the same time, I was taking world religions class, and I didn't know what to do with all of this because, like, it was like a long time ago. Nobody went to therapy. No, you just dealt and then moved on with your day. And the funny part was, and especially me, I was very closed off kind of thing. I wasn't out yet. I was just very much like, I'm just going to do school. And I was doing a research project about whatever my world religions class, and I was comparing Anglicanism and another faith. And I went and I just got a random interview with an Anglican minister that happened to be on here on campus
Hmm.
in at Western University.
That's where I went. I graduated from Huron College. Yeah.
Oh my God. So I wish I could remember this woman's name. I would drive just to be counseled by her. And I went to her and I asked her all the questions I had to ask. And at some point she said, "Are you okay?" And
Hmm.
I was just like, like
Hmm.
everything came out of my mouth, and I kept going back to her. And she counseled me. She was my therapist.
Yeah.
She never spoke about God one time. It wasn't like that. It was like, here, try this, try writing this kind of thing, or try doing this, or try speaking this.
Yeah.
And A, she was a woman, so that was rare for the time. And B, the way she spoke. I remember her early on when I was interviewing her, probably what made me feel so comfortable is I was talking about different faiths and different, let's say, paths to a creator, whatever you
Mhm.
want to. And she goes, to be honest, and this is what I love about her. God, I wish I could remember her name. She said, I was born in Christianity. I was born in this culture. I was born in this time. So, is that probably why I stand where I stand? Yes. But when I think, for example, of a Buddhist mentality or a Hindu belief and this notion that God is everywhere, or the way that you come about that kind of do I see it all as interconnected? Yeah. Yeah, I
Mhm.
do. And she said, so I don't care how anybody gets, which I've never heard anybody say at that until that moment. She goes, I don't care how anybody feels connected to something bigger. And that something bigger, it was just so opposite
Hmm.
to any religious figure ever, right? Like in my head, it's the old white guy with the long hair sitting in the big throne behind the gates.
Right.
Or Alanis Morisette, if you've seen Dogma. One of the two.
And I'm not sure which is scarier, actually, but who would I want to face in the next life? I'm not sure.
Liz. But damn it if we know what the word irony means.
Right, exactly. You want to
What
know.
what I was amazed by, and it didn't make me want it, it's not like I'm like rushing to join a faith of any kind, but it made me love the idea of being connected. And I see that pattern um replicated again and again and again in a whole bunch of different ways.
Mhm.
How do you see that? Like you're Christian, were you born into it? Is this something, because I always am fascinated with, how do you choose? Look,
Right.
there's 12 major world religions if you're not counting a lot of the other, right? What do you sit there and do you choose, or can we acknowledge that it's kind of like time and place that kind of, you know?
I mean, I think what this woman said to you. I mean, I would repeat a lot of what she said in the sense that I was raised in a Christian family. We were baptized, and I have a twin sister. We were baptized and raised in the Anglican Church. But I mean, my family wasn't super religious. It was more of a sort of Christmas and Easter, and maybe a couple of other times a year kind of thing. It was always there as part of our community, but we didn't say we didn't say grace before every meal or anything like that. Um, and so I was raised with a sense of this is part of my identity, and I think a big part of it was we came from an English culture. We I grew up in a fairly small town where everybody was white and predominantly Christian unless they said otherwise.
Mhm.
So yeah, it was very much part of my culture, but at the same time, my parents made us very aware that there were other churches, there were other faiths, and that was fine too. There was always a sense of it's like raising your child to speak a certain language, but if they want to learn another language down the road, that's great too. But here's at least something to start with.
Mhm.
So I was never raised with this exclusive idea of Christianity, and I have to be grateful to the ministers I had and the Sunday school teachers and the people in my church, that Christianity was about loving each other, and that God, whatever God was, you know, we saw God in Jesus in the sense of the kind of teachings that Jesus did, what he taught about love and service and forgiveness, that was God. And so where you experience those things, that was
Mhm.
God. And so people might call that by another name, or people might reach that by another path, and that was all fine. So I have to say that, like, growing up, I mean, I thought that was Christianity. And then when I kind of left home and I went to school and I started to encounter a kind of a more fundamentalist, right
Right.
wing evangelical Christianity, and realizing that was actually the dominant image most people had of Christianity.
Right.
I found that shocking because
Right.
that was so foreign to me. Um, and and I've had to learn how to sort of not speak that language, but understand that world, because that for so many people is what Christianity is. And for a long time, I kind of just dissociated myself from that and said, that's not my faith. Um, but but yeah, for many people it is.
Right.
Yeah, I would just say that for me, there is something bigger that connects us all, and somehow uh, it's important for me to feel a connection with that. And the more I connect with that, the more I feel connected with other people, with creation itself. And I have an interest in helping people who wish to find a way to connect in that way.
Hmm. I have a serious question and a funny question. What you like first?
Oh, let's go with the funny question.
The 33 years, Jesus, right? What was
Right?
he doing in the teenage years? I feel like we're missing a really good story. There's the Bethlehem born, and then all of a
Yeah,
sudden he's just this.
it's
I
gone.
think we missed some dodgy years. I'm not gonna lie. I want to see the movie of Jesus as a teenager. That's what I want to see.
I mean, there's lots of theories about that, right? Like he traveled, he spent time in India, that he studied with Buddhists. I mean, a lot of people have acknowledged similarities between his teachings and Buddha. So they wonder, was there an influence? I mean, I think he spent his time as an obscure teenager in a small Galilean town, and
Gotta be more. I mean, come on. He's all gonna be walking on water at 33 and he doesn't do anything all the way
yeah,
up until then?
but if he's God incarnate, does he need to go anywhere to know all this stuff?
But okay, we can come back to the Trinity. I mean, now we're gonna get deep. And now we're gonna get deep. Um, I've lost my other question because that one was so funny. I do know this. How and this is a lot of my listeners. I'm just going to ask you every question I've ever had about religion, only because I don't necessarily have these conversations very often. How do you know?
I
That's a
don't.
question every agnostic and atheist, I think, want to know. When you say there, I am connected to something. I am, when you talk about that, when you say there's this connection, I just want to share it.
Yeah.
To somebody, for me, for example, how would you explain it to me that you know?
Well, first of all, I would say I don't know. I mean, that's why we call it faith. Part of it is, and I don't mean that as a get out of, let's get out of this question,
No, I
by
understand.
digging around it. But I mean, I always say that any faith really is agnostic, that at least there's a level of an agnosticism to any healthy faith, because if you're claiming and you're certain, what do you need to believe for? What do you need to have faith in? Because faith is, as St. Paul says, faith is, hope and belief in those things that we can't see and that we don't know. So, I mean, yeah, I think all faith is to some degree agnostic. It's not about knowing, it's about
Choosing.
choosing to believe. And sometimes you do that, and sometimes that choice is really easy because I sense that connection. And that connection for me is love. That connection for me is there's a sense of meaning. There's a sense of there's something going on here that's bigger than us and this moment. And I can feel that really strongly. And other times I'm like, I'm grappling in the dark going, I don't sense this. I don't feel God. I don't know what God is doing, if God is doing anything here, but I'm choosing to believe.
That
Because
is an
yeah.
impressive answer. Go ahead.
And when I
Sorry.
say, when you say, how do you know you're connected? Again, I don't know that it's always about feeling connected, but it's about seeking that connection. It's kind of like when you're trying to connect to Wi-Fi and it's not coming up on the, yeah, and it's not coming up on the screen,
I got
but
two bad bars.
there's at least one bar, and you've connected before, so you just keep trying until it
Oh
works.
my God, I just saw the cover of a book you should write with the little Wi-Fi and like Jesus 1, Jesus 2.
I think I've made promises to many, many people over the years that I will never write a book because I think there's too many people that are terrified I will.
Oh my God, it would be genius. It would be genius. Now, let's get to how I came across you and like how you handle yourself on Twitter, because let's just say Twitter, speaking of hellscapes, that's
Mm.
it. If there's a portal to hell, we
Yeah,
know where it's,
yeah.
um and especially when it comes to right now, and I think it's a really good time to talk about it, but right now, obviously, the gay issue's always been that thing, right? Always, always, not of every faith, not of every denomination, obviously, as you said about the Anglican Church, and now the trans community,
Mm.
right? So you have major, and well, let's throw an abortion. Let's
Mhm.
just throw it all in there. Let's just everything that Twitter goes mental about, and everything that the right, especially in the United States and in Canada, because you can hear Pierre just mimicking
Yeah,
everything.
yeah.
Let's handle the big three: being gay, abortion, being trans.
Mm.
Which one do you want to talk about? which
I can speak personally about the gay thing,
let's
trans and abortion. I
let's
have some thoughts on, but not
let's
experience.
talk with the gay thing then. Let's start there because I saw a great. Did you see the documentary, or have you seen clips of the 1946 documentary?
Yeah, clips of it, yeah.
Okay, so the 1946 documentary? If anybody hasn't seen clips or hasn't seen the actual thing, was the idea that the word homosexual did not appear in any version of the Bible until 1946, and from what I understand, it took place of the word pedophile, or
Uh,
it was reinterpreted.
yeah, I mean the original Greek word, in its translation suggests pedophilia, or or sex with a temple prostitute. Like it wasn't just sex between men. There was a context there.
Stop
And
right now. We should just do a whole podcast on temple prostitutes.
again, not something I have a lot of experience with.
Please. I'll be going to Google all right after this. Sorry. So go ahead. So
So yeah, I mean, I think
yeah,
what happened with that is that a very specific context around, what we could say is, does the Bible talk about homosexual activity? Yes, but always within specific context.
right.
And that context was lost by just sort of using the word homosexual. It suddenly meant that the context of the act doesn't matter anymore. Just the fact that someone is homosexual is itself a sin and to be condemned. And
Right.
so a whole political cultural bias that isn't necessarily there in those passages is suddenly applied to all of those passages, and just the whole Bible is against homosexuality now.
Right.
And then, several generations growing up with that.
Now let's break this down a little bit because I think about this in two ways. I'm gonna put it wasn't ever in the Bible. I'm gonna put that over here for a second because that's one road. The one road is you forget the context. You're
Mm-hmm.
not paying attention to the context. So therefore, we'll deal with that separately. Let's say, for argument's sake, it's in there. And it's only in the Old Testament, am I right?
No, there are passages in Paul's letter to the Romans that talks about God, giving them over to unnatural lusts and desires for their own sex, kind of thing. So
Okay.
so there, I
That
mean,
kind of an inference in that, or was it more specific? Are you just trying to be careful with your words right now?
no, I think it was. So yeah, I mean, yes, I think there is condemnation of same-sex activity in both the Old Testament and the New Testament. But
Okay.
again, I think you have to look at the context around that. And even in Paul's letter to the Romans, where he's talking about this, what's often missed is that he's basically setting his audience up, because he's basically saying to the Christian church in Rome, which is made up of Jews and Gentiles,
Right.
he's going through all of this because his whole idea is we're all sinners, we all fall short, we all
Oh,
need God's grace. And so what he does is he goes through and he lists all of these taboos, which would have, all the people in the church would have been like, yes, those people are terrible, those people are beyond the pale. And just as he's got them all worked up about all those sinners that God condemns, he pulls the rug from under them and says, and you guys are just as bad,
right.
you need God's grace just as much. So the
Right.
point wasn't to point out here's all the people God condemns, but to make the bigger argument that in judging others, you
Right.
yourself are guilty of the thing you're judging others for.
Now here's the argument I tend to think about when people talk, even when people raise it, like without the context. Forget that, you know what I mean? They're just like, it's there, it's there, it's there. And my response would always be, so is slavery.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly.
So my question is, if you are adamantly opposed to homosexuality, are you adamantly in support of
Yeah.
slavery? Because I'm going to need to hear those two sentences go hand in hand, right? Because if the Bible, Old and New, is infallible in the sense of context or infallible in the sense of application to today, then if you ate meat on Friday, what,
Yeah.
right? And so it all kind of falls apart. And that's where I start to say, well, if like, I feel like is it a valid way to go at the argument, or do people just, ignore
No,
me?
I think that is, and I mean that's something that that's an argument I've often had. It's like as a more, I guess I probably would be called a more liberal or progressive Christian, and one of the constant accusations from the right wing evangelicals are, well, you people cherry pick the Bible, you decide which parts of the Bible you want to follow and what you like, and then you ignore the rest. Well, there's nobody that doesn't do that.
Mm.
Everyone cherry picks. You can't, because the Bible contradicts itself in some places.
Right.
So yes, I think that's a great argument that, yes, let's say the Bible's against homosexuality, but it's against all kinds of things that we all do now.
Right.
It seems to support things that we've all, as a culture, have agreed to get rid of, like
Right.
slavery. And what I find is that, my argument has always been, why are the goalposts allowed to move on certain issues,
Hmm.
right? Which even the most fundamentalist churches have accepted, like divorce, right? I mean,
Right.
Jesus is pretty clear. There's no divorce in his mind.
None.
And yet There's lots of divorced pastors out there that have no problem with that. But why this issue?
Right.
So, and it does seem when you look back over history, there's
Why do you
always
think it
one
is?
issue or one group of people that are the scapegoat, right? These are the people, whether it's witches, or like women were burning at the stake as witches, or whether it's the Jews because they killed Christ, or whether it's the LGBT community or whatever. There's always that group that this generation of Christians is going to focus on as
Hmm.
being they're the source of all sin and corruption in our society. And it's that need to find a scapegoat that I think, I have the biggest problem with. I mean, Jesus is crucified himself as a scapegoat.
Right.
Why do we keep crucifying each other?
Yeah. Ooh, that's a great sentence you just said there. Why do we keep crucifying each other?
Mm.
Um, yeah, I think that, I mean, I think it's a natural tendency, unfortunately, to find simplistic solutions to complicated problems. And I think there's a very simplistic, and I've said this before in maybe different podcasts, but I think there is a simplistic solution or idea, and it totally makes sense.
Mhm.
Why any religion doesn't want to support the gay population pre any kind of real science, and it's simple. Two gay people are not having babies.
Yeah, I mean,
Very
that's
simple.
yeah. I mean, and I've made that point, especially with a lot of the the condemnation of homosexuality in the Hebrew scriptures. I mean, you've got a small struggling nation that's
Yes,
surrounded by larger dominant empires. They're
gotta have
trying to
babies.
survive. They want to thrive. Allowing people to enter, not marry, and have children. That's a threat to the society.
Right?
So yeah, that
I mean,
again,
isn't
that's the
that it?
context in which people were
Yes.
looking at that, right?
Right.
And I think that's the other thing. Prior to like the 19th century, there wasn't people knew that some people engaged in same sex activity. That's not a new thing, but the whole idea of sexual orientation, that people are naturally by nature attracted to who they are,
Mhm.
that for most of human history that hasn't existed. So you also have to look at the whole Bible, which is a number of different books and things written at different times, but all of the authors of all the books of the Bible are assuming that all human beings are naturally heterosexual, like
Mhm.
from their perspective. So from their perspective, anyone who engages in same-sex activity is deliberately and intentionally going against their nature. And
Right.
so if you believe that, it would make sense to question, why would you do that? What kind of evil forces are making you do that? When you acknowledge, and not every church still does, but I think the vast majority of us accept science and understand that there's a portion of the human population that always has been and always will be, you know, uh, oriented towards members of the same sex.
Mhm.
When you accept that that's part of who they are, then it changes the conversation, because
Mhm.
now we have to have conversations about, well, we can talk about what's ethical, in terms of how I live out my sexuality. But what we can't say anymore is my sexuality in and of itself is
Mhm.
sinful and wrong, because it is just what it is.
Mhm.
And I don't think the Bible's dealing with that. Like when people talk about what does the Bible say about homosexuality, I always want to say, well, nothing.
Right.
It talks about homosexual activity, but in specific contexts and with an understanding of it that's very different from what we have. But
Right.
again, people want simple black and white answers.
Simple, right. And
Yeah,
and and I mean, and a lot of this stems from the whole, "Were you born that way?"
yeah,
Right? And a lot
yeah.
of people will ask that question, will bring up that question, and the funny part is I won't answer it.
No,
Or I'll say the opposite. I'll be like, "Nah, I decided last Thursday."
yeah,
Because the question assumes wrongdoing. If I've chosen it, it's unacceptable. If I was born that way and got
I hear you.
Oh,
Sorry.
sorry. Is that all right?
Only you're muted on my end.
It's not showing it muted here. That's weird. So we're back. Sorry about that hiccup, but we both agree it might be Satan.
Oh.
Or Alanis Morissette, because we made the ironic joke. One of the two. We were getting to the heart of something.
And Alanis jumped right in.
But I think all the things you were talking about, like speaking about context and speaking about, and we were talking about when I would never sort of answer whether, do I think it's a choice or not, because I think it's ridiculous. It's presupposing a negative action that I just refuse to. Again, my answer usually is last Thursday. When they ask me, if I chose being gay, I'm like,
Mhm.
well, I have better hair, gay. So yeah,
Why would you not choose it?
why would I? Yeah. But I think it's very interesting too, because a lot of people, so I don't know if you notice, I wear a St. Christopher.
I wonder
Only
what that was actually.
I
Okay.
like the hypocrisy of St. Christopher. That's my rare.
Hypocrisy.
Well, because he was like kicked out, let back, like he was
Yeah.
in, kicked out, let back in, and the Papal Infallibility Act, and it's like
Yeah.
somebody had to be wrong, and I just enjoy it. Um, and I surf, so I was gifted it. Every surfer has a, anyways. But I like it. A lot of people will ask what my medallions are, and I wear them religiously. There's some irony. Um, Alanis, if you're listening.
She is obviously. Shh, careful.
Uh, um, but people will say, do you worry or do you think about when you die? This is the big put. I think a lot. Do you worry about when you die? And I very honestly say, they're like, what do you think? I said, I don't think about
Mhm.
it. I have zero thoughts. And it's not in a, demeaning people who think about the afterlife or anything in any kind of way, other than the fact it never crosses my mind, because I feel like there's two possibilities here.
Yeah.
One, nothing,
Hmm.
nothing. Or two, something pretty cool. And I think I've been a good enough person in this life to rate the cool factor of going somewhere cool. And if I haven't, walking the way I've walked, I'm pretty sure it's not the cool place I want to be anyways.
Yeah. I mean, when you pay attention to a lot of the people that are the most worried about the afterlife and who's going there and certain about what it is and who gets in and who doesn't, I always think I don't want to spend eternity with
I'm
you
not.
anyway,
No,
right? Like it's
absolutely
you're
not.
not your destination isn't where I want to be anyway. I mean, and I think this is a big shift. I think in religion for me, anyways, is at least within Christianity recognizing that Jesus spent way more time talking about this life and how we are to live now, here and now. And, and when he talked about the kingdom of God, right, or the kingdom of heaven, he was talking about not us getting there, but how does it get here through us?
Yeah.
Um, and that was the bigger issue. And that's I don't know what the afterlife is. I believe that there is something beyond this. I believe that love doesn't end. I believe that what's created in love survives death. I think that's what the whole resurrection is all about for me.
Mm,
And so I do believe in something, but I don't know what the details are, and I'm not all that concerned about it because that's out of my hands anyway. I don't know what the party will look like, and I'm not in charge of the guest list.
right.
From my perspective, I am in charge of getting invitations out.
What a lovely way. There's me wanting to be like, I got the guest list. I'm in charge.
I'll
Oh,
make sure you're on the list, Joe.
so my mom says. My mom knows my uncle and
That's
I.
two of us working on your behalf. So
We're on the atheist side. My mom's like, don't worry. I'll take care of it when I get there. I'm like,
just
oh my
just
God.
tell them you know me. Yeah.
Yeah. Just give my name at the door. But I think it's so important. And I think that's what the fire and brimstone of hell and the eternal happiness, that's probably the part I don't like the most about Christianity, because I don't know much about Islam in that sense. I know Judaism doesn't really spend any time talking about the afterlife,
Not
but
really. No.
that's the part that always bothered me for two reasons. Number one, don't threaten me.
Yeah.
But because that's what that is. And number two, when you lead somebody to do what is right, out of fear of punishment, are they ever doing what's right anyways?
Yeah. I mean, I say, like, for me, the heart of the relationship that I think, God, what I call God, wants with us is one of love. And, if I put a gun to your head and say, tell me you love me, you're probably going to do it, but you're doing it out of fear. And that's not going to establish the relationship. And that's abusive and it's manipulative. And so, to me, the whole doing anything out of fear of punishment has never been for me the heart of what my faith should be. And it's not about how I preach, and it's not about how I engage others in conversation around Christianity or faith, because to me that's a betrayal of what I think God actually is.
Hmm.
Um, Fear and and yeah, it's sort of like we're in Lent right now. We just entered the season, and so the focus often becomes around sin, right? And our individual sin, our collective sin, how that separates us from God. And I'm happy to talk about sin, but I think of sin more as a disease that God wants to heal, as opposed to a crime that God wants to punish, right?
Wow, that's great. Yeah.
And I think there's way more, even in the gospel. That's how I see Jesus
Mm.
addressing sin, right? It's not, it's what are we doing intentionally or unintentionally, that gets in the way of us living abundantly and freely and lovingly, and we should address that. But it's like an illness that we're not necessarily responsible for, but it's affecting us. And the whole idea is not to blame us for that, but find out what's wrong and what do we need to heal that.
That's so lovely. That is a beautiful description of what I wish so many people would be. Why do you think that is not at the forefront? Why do you think the Matt Walshes and the Marjorie Taylor, heaven help me, or Lauren Bo?
Yeah,
Why do you think these people? And you originally said scapegoats, right? And we talked about simplicity of messaging. So if you have simplicity of messaging and key people to blame, and everything's going crappy because of them,
yeah.
do you think it's just a politicization tool, or do you think that maybe religion itself is politics in and of itself?
Yes.
And they're just, you know what I mean? I don't, because a lot of people say, oh, well, it's the way politicians manipulate religion. I'm like, I've seen religion itself
Yeah, yeah,
run a lot of roads I wouldn't want it to run.
yeah.
But why do you think people are drawn to the fire and the brimstone, for lack of a better synopsis?
Well, I mean, we tend to be drawn to the fire and the brimstone for other people, not for ourselves, right?
Sure, of
Like,
course.
it's that
Every reason in the
typical.
world that doesn't belong. Yeah, yeah.
Right, yeah, it's that typical. I want mercy and forgiveness for myself, and I want justice and punishment for you, right?
Mhm.
And I think a lot of it does have to do with control, and that's where the politics comes up, right? And I don't just mean politics as in politicians, but as you
Yeah,
said, religion itself is very
yeah.
political, and it's about, if I know, if I can point to who I know is wrong, and it's the whole high school, you know. Clique thing, right? If I know who the outsiders are, then maybe I'm an insider, right?
Right.
If I can condemn or judge others, then the spotlight isn't on me.
Mhm.
So I think part of it is an attempt to control. I think that there are a lot of politicians do use Christianity, um, in a way that I don't think they really have any actual interest in what Christianity actually teaches, but they
Mhm.
know that it has a lot of cultural power, and there's a lot of votes there in that evangelical world, and so I think there is a manipulation of it, but that happens within religion itself too.
Right.
Um, and yeah, I think it is fear. It really is. It's fear of. Um, it, People don't want to have faith; they want to know. And so,
Mm.
if we can
There it
draw
is.
the lines, yeah, and make it clear, then I know, and then I'm safe.
There it is. People don't want to have faith. They want to know.
Yeah,
So if somebody says with all of the certainty, I know, and don't worry, you're on the in, then people will back that till their dying day, which goes back to, unfortunately, one of my favorite political philosophers,
Mhm.
Thomas Hobbes, who said, people will
Mhm.
give up everything if you promise them safety and security.
Yes.
Whatever liberty they think they have that is important, they will give it up
Yep.
if you promise, if you assure them a level of security. And we're not talking of in this life. So they've taken it a step way past Thomas Hobbes, right? They've said,
Yeah.
it's not, I'm not just putting a security grate around your house. I got you for eternity.
Mhm. Mhm.
God.
Yeah, and it's one of the things that really worries me. I mean, that this gets beyond religion and into politics, but it's the thing that has worried me for a long time in what I see in happening in the States, and what I worry about happening more and more in Canada now. It's that populism. It's that I can, I people are willing to give up freedoms, rights, and not their own so much as they're willing to give up their neighbors' freedoms and rights,
Yeah.
because you can offer me protection. But protection from what? I mean, it's like, let me generate. First of all, let me identify what you need to be afraid of, and then I will tell you how I'm going to protect you from it. And so
Right.
it's the whole, like, let me create the devil and the hellfire and brimstone, and then I'll tell you how to go about avoiding it.
Right.
And that gives me a whole lot of power over you, because I've not only created the fear, but I've created the salvation from the fear, and I control both.
Wow, it's a good game.
Yeah.
Somebody created a very good game. What about, and I'm going to come down to back to Twitter in a second. Where do you, I guess, where do you stand, or where would the church stand? My mom worked at St. Mike's Hospital for a long time, and they do not perform abortions.
Right.
Um, where would the Anglican Church, or have they ever made? Well, I guess they wouldn't, right? Because you're saying it's not like Rome. And all right, listen, that's the second time, Alanis, and I'm going to listen to you, hon. I'm going to take a moment. I'm going to reflect on some of the things I've said. I am going to thank Reverend Daniel for coming on and speaking with me, and I hope you come on and speak with me some more. I applaud your work on Twitter. Guys, please go follow this gentleman on Twitter. He does an amazing job of keeping the right wing insanity at bay, and he does it with humor and wit that I aspire to. So thank you so much, sir. Can you tell them where to find you on Twitter? And
Yeah. At Rev Daniel.
Rev Daniel.
Um, yeah, and I'd love to come back anytime and talk more about Twitter and the things that Alanis wouldn't let us talk about.
Don't say it again. We won't get through this end.
Maybe you're supposed to have Alanis on. Maybe that's the problem.
I'll make the call. Thank you so much. And thank you guys for listening. Leave your comments and questions below. And I would love to do another session with Reverend Daniel in the coming, hopefully, months. And we'll plan it differently. We'll never mention the name who will not be mentioned. Thank you guys so much. We'll see you tomorrow. Next Tuesday, same bat time, same bat station. Dismissed.